Yeah. All right, thanks everyone. Councillors and visitors, can I please ask you to remember to switch your electronic devices to silent? Welcome everybody. I'd also like to welcome the viewers at home who are watching the meeting via the live stream. And of course tonight will be the first time that they'll also be able to listen to public question time. I'll now ask everyone please to stand up, and Deputy Mayor Bianca Sandri, could you please read out the opening prayer?
Almighty God, we ask you to guide us in all our discussions, to show goodness, honesty, understanding and wisdom in all that we undertake to do. May we respect each other's views at all times, and we ask all of this in your name.
Amen. And acknowledgement of country, Councillor Boothman, if you could please read out.
On behalf of councillors, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, on which this meeting is taking place, and show our respect for elders past, present and emerging.
Thank you. You can all take your seats. Thanks. Please note that without prior approval, any recording of this meeting is prohibited. Members of the public should note that no action should be taken on any resolution of council prior to written advice from the city being received. Now takes us to item 1, which is the official opening. Ladies and gentlemen, I declare the council meeting of the 8th of September 2020 open at 7:01 p.m. Item 2, attendance and apologies, nil. Item 3, approved leave of absence, I have nil. Item 4, disclosure of interest. Oh, that's not now. So this is. No, I'll ask for them later. Yep. Item 4, disclosure of interest. The following disclosures of interest have been received. From the Community and Resource Committee, 1st of September, Councillor Stephanie Proud disclosed an impartial interest in item 12.1 RL1 as she is a social member of the Wembley Downs Tennis Club. Councillor David Lagan disclosed an impartial interest in item 12.1 CS1 as he has completed SDERA, the School Drug Education and Road Aware Training in Community Drug Awareness Program and Delivery, including local drug action groups. Councillor David Lagan disclosed an impartial interest in item 12.1 PRS1 as he is an employee of the Department of Education. Councillor David Lagan disclosed an impartial interest in item 12.1 PRS2 as he met with the developer on site on Monday the 31st of August to view the parking bays referred to within the report. Councillor Chris Hatton disclosed an impartial interest in item 12.1 PRS2 as a family member is a developer. Councillor Carlo Perkov disclosed an impartial interest in item 12.1 PRS2 as he knows a developer. Councillor Bianca Sandri disclosed an impartial interest in item 12.1 PRS2 as the owner of the land is known to her. Councillor Bianca Sandri disclosed a financial interest in item 12.1 PRS2 as an owner is also an owner of a building company which is a client of her business. Councillor Adam Spagnolo disclosed an impartial interest in item 12.1 PRS2 as the applicant is known to him. Councillor Chris Hatton disclosed an impartial interest in item 12.1 TE1 as a family member is a business owner. Councillor Carlo Perkov disclosed an impartial interest in 12.1 TE1 as he knows the owner. Councillor Bianca Sandri disclosed an impartial interest in item 12.1 TE1 as a business owner for the tender is known to her. Councillor Bianca Sandri disclosed a financial interest in item 12.1 TE1 as an owner is also an owner of a building company which is a client of her business. Councillor Adam Spagnolo disclosed an impartial interest in item 12.1 TE1 as the applicant is known to him. I've also received notice for item 12.1 PRS2 from Councillor Ferranti as a financial interest as a shareholder. Councillors, are there any other disclosures? I think we've got them all. Good. That brings us to item 5, which is petitions. No petitions have been received by the City. Councillors, do you have any unverified petitions that you would like to present? There's no indication. We've got item 6, responses to previous questions from members of the public taken on notice. And all questions from the previous council meeting were published in the minutes of that meeting. Councillors and members of the public, before moving on to public question time this evening, I would like to invite the Director of Planning and Development to make a statement. The City has received multiple questions for tonight's meeting in relation to the Karrinyup redevelopment site, and the City's statement is just to provide some further clarity and information.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And thanks for the question and interest in the JDAP application for a mixed-use development at Karrinyup Shopping Centre. I thought it appropriate to provide a general statement that hopefully addresses some of the key components of the questions we received today, and we do thank people for providing those questions in writing. This application is a mandatory development assessment panel application and was formally lodged with the City on the 20th of July. This means that all required information for the City to consider the application was submitted on this date, and the DAP commenced the clock. The City has no control over when DAP applications are lodged and must process the application in accordance with the statutory requirements. The City's role in the application process is as a responsible authority, which means that the City receives and processes the development application, which includes internal referrals to relevant business units within the City of Stirling, external referrals to relevant agencies and authorities, as well as formal public consultation and the assessment of the proposal. The City will provide its responsible authority report to the decision maker, being the Metro Inner North JDAP. The responsible authority report will include the referral responses, outcomes of advertising, and the City's assessment of the proposal. The City is required to submit its responsible authority report to the DAP Secretariat within 78 days from the date of formal lodgement, unless an extension of time is provided by the applicant and approved by the presiding member of the JDAP. At the time a JDAP meeting is scheduled, all submitters will be notified of the upcoming JDAP meeting and details on how to make a deputation at the JDAP meeting if they wish to do so. It should be noted that Council have called this development application in, and therefore the responsible authority report will be considered by Council at a future meeting. Once this responsible authority report has been provided to the DAP, the panel will consider the application and make a decision on the proposal at the meeting. To reiterate, the City is not the decision maker for this application. The decision maker is the Metro Inner North JDAP. To confirm, there is no activity centre plan for this site, and the City's assessment of the proposal will be against the relevant planning framework. For context, the City of Stirling recommended refusal of the original development application in 2015 for a number of reasons, one of which being that the application did not conform with the requirements of State Planning Policy 4.2, Activity Centres for Perth and Peel, which amongst other things requires an activity centre plan to be endorsed prior to major development being approved. At this stage, the City is currently carrying out its assessment of the development and is therefore not in a position to comment on the suitability of the proposal with respect to the matters raised in a number of the questions received. This includes, but not limited to, building height, building bulk, setbacks, traffic and parking.
Thank you, Mr Roddick. We'll now proceed with public question time. This evening, public question time will be live streamed, as I mentioned before. So, especially for those who are familiar with the process, when you are invited to the lectern, tonight please state your name and your suburb only. So you don't have to state your full address, just your suburb only. We'll now move on to public question time, and I'll ask Lynn Noack, please, if you'd like to come forward. And just as you're first up, if you can press that microphone on the bottom, there's a button on the bottom right, and the red light will come on. That's
Good
it.
evening, councillors, mayor, neighbours.
And just your name and the suburb.
Name Lynette Noack, Karrinyup. A question without notice. We were just told community activity. Does that cover the library?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you're referring to.
It was in reference to the development.
There's nothing on the cards with the library at the moment.
Okay.
So,
If I may proceed to my questions then.
sure.
I actually had 3 questions. One does involve the library, in fact. It was a follow-on from some weeks ago. After the 2015 shopping centre plans for Karrinyup, and of course we've just heard a short spiel about that, they were eventually approved in 2015. The City of Stirling had changes made to the restrictive covenants over the library in 2016 and then again in 2017. This concerned the use of the library land and or the housing or building. Is that a coincidence, or has the council had some sort of plan on the changes that may reflect further needs for the shopping centre development by either AMP or Blackburn or any other commercial entity?
Sure. No, it's not a coincidence, but it's not related currently with AMP. We certainly are aware that there was covenant on there.
Okay. Does it potentially involve a closure of the library?
No.
So the community can be assured that a library will stay in Karrinyup?
Yes, at this stage, there is no plan to close that library.
Okay. All right, if I may move on to my second question. I think I'll leave that library as it is at the moment. Some of the wording I don't like, but we'll move on. Is the council aware or taken actions to ascertain the level of interference to the free-to-air, for example, television and internet in Burrows Road? Because since the building has begun in Karrinyup, free-to-air TV doesn't exist. It's interfered every day, all day.
Thank you. No, I don't think we are aware of that. So we're not aware of that. So we're happy to talk to you afterwards and get some information on that.
That'd be lovely. Thank you. And my final question, and of course it does refer in part to the height of the proposed buildings by Blackburn. I'm just wondering, given the vacancy rate and the lack of apartment purchase and culture of Perth, do the councillors believe it is necessary to have, I won't mention the number, extremely high towers as an apartment block in Karrinyup? Because it would be nice to know what Blackburn's justification is for the changes from the original height that they proposed.
Okay.
And, sorry,
No, that's all right. Is that the finish of the question?
no. I was just wondering if an impact study or a proposal for an impact study has been done, and if not an impact study, why hasn't it been done?
Thank you. I'll get Mr. Rodich to provide a response. I guess one of the things he will say is that the actual occupancy of any apartments is not a planning consideration for us. But
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for that point. I do agree with that. The consideration of building height, as I've stated before, Ms. Noax, will be considered as part of the city's assessment of this application, and we're still going through that at this current moment. The applicant's justification for the proposed development, including height, is provided within the development application. Although consultation period has closed, this information is still available on the city's website.
Okay,
thank you for your questions.
thank you.
Ethne Kruger. And again, just your name and your suburb, please.
Okay, good evening. Ethne Kruger, Karrinyup. My first question, can you explain what the current zoning is on both Burrows Road and Davenport Road? And do you expect this to change with the ongoing building at Karrinyup?
Thank you, Mr. Rodich.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Kruger, for the question. Along Burrows Road, properties are zoned residential with a residential density coding of R30. The city has no current intention of rezoning properties along Burrows Road and Davenport Street in response to the redevelopment of the Karrinyup Shopping Centre.
So none at all?
Not at this stage.
Because there seems to be a rumour going around that there will be a change to the rezoning.
I promise you we're giving you the right answers.
Okay. Does the council support the 23 stories proposed by Blackburn, given a new development in Scarborough called Altum has been restricted to 5 or 6 by the Coffs Council?
Thank you. And obviously that matter isn't before council at the moment, so they can't make a determination on that.
Okay. Third question. Given Observation City is only 16 stories, Leighton Beach has only 8 stories, and in Cottesloe they have trouble going above 4 stories, does the council believe 23 stories is in keeping with a community such as Karrinyup?
Thank
and
you.
If so, how?
Determination.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Alan Mayers, please. And your name and suburb, thank you.
My name is Alan Morse. My suburb is Karrinyup.
Thank you. Apologies. I got that wrong.
Thank you for the opportunity to interact with the council in this way. Local residents have been very patient in dealing with very significant disruption and chaos, things like dust, noise, traffic, parking, etc., during the so far 2 years of demolition and construction at the Karrinyup Shopping Centre site. The heavy vehicle traffic in particular is causing damage to things like roads, curbing, bollards, verges, in-street trees, which were planted recently by the council and have made a nice difference to the streets. Pavements and lawns. Will the City of Stirling ensure that appropriate ongoing repairs are made to the city's assets, and will the developers contribute to those repairs?
Thank you. Mr Rodich?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Mr Morse, for the question. All three surrounding city-controlled roads are being upgraded by the shopping centre. These works will include verge upgrades, new footpaths, landscaping, curbing, drainage and road resurfacing works. All works have been supervised by the city's engineering operations team, and all associated works are fully funded by the shopping centre.
Thank you. Will that go down as far as Pascoe Street, or is it just the streets?
Mr Rodich?
Mr Mouse, the conditions of the approval relate to the surrounding streets around the property. Of course, if there's any damage, and that can be proven by, I guess, the developer on those local streets, we'll look into that for sure.
Okay, thanks. Second question. The corners of the redeveloped Karrinyup Shopping Centre are considered to be iconic locations. Indeed, the corner of Francis Avenue and Karrinyup Road, which is the busiest intersection, represents, in fact, the welcome to Karrinyup. My question is, does the city believe that a petrol station represents an iconic building as desired on that corner, and has formal approval been given to build an ugly and inherently hazardous petrol station on the corner of Francis Avenue and Karrinyup Road, which is adjacent to a childcare centre and a medical centre?
I can answer the first part and say I don't think a petrol station's iconic, and I'll pass it over to Mr Rodich for the rest of the answer.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Mr Mouse, for the question. As mentioned at the meeting with members of the community, ward councillors and the city officers held on Monday the 24th of August 2020, which I believe you attended, the city did advise that there may be a potential development application for a service station on the corner of Francis Avenue and Karrinyup Road. Should a formal development application be submitted, the city will consider the proposal against the relevant framework applicable to this site.
So the existing petrol station...
So let me just get some... So you want some clarification? What part aren't you sure of?
Well, it seems to me that the existing petrol station has to move
Sure.
in order for the 24-storey tower to be built.
Mr Rodich?
Mr Moss, that is correct. If this application is supported, this involves construction of development where the current petrol station is. We haven't received a development application for a new petrol station on the corner of Francis and Karrinyup Road, but if one is submitted, the city will assess the proposal against the relevant framework.
So we haven't received an application for that.
Okay. So you can apply to build on a site that's already occupied?
Sorry, sir, we have to just keep this to questions. We're happy to take it offline, though, and go through it all.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense to me. My final question. Residents of the streets surrounding the Karrinyup Shopping Centre have so far endured 2 years of fairly chaotic heavy construction activity in the knowledge that it was for the greater good of the expected 3-year shopping centre redevelopment. However, the associated East Village Apartments building on Francis Avenue, which was originally to be 4 storeys but was later changed to 7 storeys, has not yet even started. Is there any indication that the East Village will now not go ahead? And if it does not, if not, what is the exact date that building must commence on the East Village, and when must it be completed by?
And I can let you know there is no indication that it will not go ahead. Certainly the staging changed for different reasons, especially during COVID, but the shopping centre is actually running ahead of schedule.
And any time limit on the East Village?
Mr Rodich, do you have any knowledge of when the East Village?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Moss, all I can, I guess, confirm is that the time frame for substantial commencement of this development is the 19th of October 2024. The application had approval for 4 years in October 2018. However, due to the COVID-19, the state has increased timeframes from development by a further 2 years, taking the approval, I guess, the limit up to October 2024, where before they could substantially commence the site. There's no building permit being submitted for the site. We have had discussions with the builder and applicant for that site, and we do envisage seeing a building permit submitted in the near future.
Okay, so perhaps many more years of construction. Thank you.
Thank you. Judy Lundy, please.
Thank you. Judy Lundy, Karrinyup. So my first question, and all my questions are on the Karrinyup Western Residential Development, DA 19-1906. My first question is, to what degree is the City satisfied that an adequate social and environmental impact assessment has been done to determine the full range of short, medium and long-term negative impacts on local residents and the environment, particularly given that the City had raised concerns in August 2015 that the development proposed a real risk for significant increase in congestion and a negative parking impact in the sub-region around the centre?
Mr Roddish.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Ms Lundy, for the question. As I've stated before, the application's still under assessment. The City will be considering any of those issues raised, environmental concerns, negative impacts on parking and around the sub-region of the centre. It's all part of the planning assessment. As I've said before, we're still going through that process. These things will all be identified in the City's responsible authority report, which will be provided to Council and provided to the Joint Development Assessment Panel.
And that will include on things like the sensitive Trigg Bushland Reserve, habitat for endangered species and...
I'm sorry, what we're going to have to do tonight, we do just need to stick to the questions and not continually ask questions, because we have got a few to get through. We're happy to take some of these offline though and have a meeting with you outside.
Okay, so my second question is, my understanding is that the Design Review Panel has or will review the developer's assessment against the 10 SPP 7.0 design principles, but will not be reviewing any community input and concerns against these 10 principles. Given that the aim of the DRP is to help improve the design of the development for the benefit of our community, as per the City's own website, does Council believe that this procedure would pass the reasonable person test or the pub test in terms of fairness and equity, given that the majority of local residents of Karrinyup believe the excessiveness of this development will negatively impact on at least 6 of the 10 design principles, including context and character, amenity, safety, community, sustainability and aesthetics?
Yes. Okay. So it's important to, the design review panel is to work with the applicant to, before it's lodged, to try to get a better outcome. Community consultation then occurs, and the council will certainly take on board the community comments regard to all this.
Okay, my final question. I'm one of the unfortunate people who lives on Burrows Road, one of the streets that will be most impacted by the proposed development. My partner and I only moved to Perth and Karrinyup about 2.5 years ago, and we selected Karrinyup due to the amenity of the suburb and the quiet residential neighbourhood, appealing to a more mature age couple. Since moving in, we have been having increased levels of concerns about the traffic levels and speeds on Burrows Road, having witnessed a number of near misses on the intersection of Karrinyup and Burrows Roads. We've also witnessed pedestrians, including school-aged children, nearly being hit by vehicles as they cross the street. We have twice reported our concerns.
I'm sorry, Ms Lundy, I'm going to have to ask you to ask a question.
So given these concerns and that context, is the Council satisfied that an adequate risk assessment has been conducted on traffic issues on Burrows and surrounding roads which will be impacted by this development?
Thank you.
And that adequate risk mitigation strategies have or will be put in place to reduce the likelihood of a major or catastrophic impact?
Thank you. And that application, as been answered, is still under consideration by council officers and will come back to council before it goes further.
Thank you.
And council, I do need an extension of question time. If I can ask Councillor Proud, seconded Councillor Hatton, just a show of hands, please. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Andre Dines.
Andre Dines, Burrows Road, Karrinyup. Good evening, Mayor Irwin, councillors, City and city staff and residents. I have 3 questions for tonight, but the first 2 have been addressed by Mr Roddick in relation to the Activity Centre Plan and Structure Plan. Will my submitted questions actually be in the minutes? Excellent, thank you.
Yes.
Then I'll move straight to question 3 that was submitted. Could the Mayor please confirm that the City of Stirling's responsible authority report for the development application of 19/1906 will address the proposed development that does not or should not qualify for any planning exemptions as a shovel-ready project in response to the recent legislation introduced to assist the offset of the economic impact of COVID-19 as A. The proponent has already advised the City of Stirling and JDAP in its various numerous amendment applications, including as late as May 2020, that it cannot undertake both the commercial and the residential development construction in the same area at the same time. The residential component on the eastern side of the site has commenced pre-sales. However, the current economic environment means that there can be no guarantee to the start date. Any delays would transfer to the western residential component. As such, it is not possible to guarantee the commencement date of the western residential component. B. The proponents have indicated the commercial works on the western site would preclude the commencement of the western residential development for approximately 4 years, subject to approvals and market conditions. C. The proponent has a shovel-ready site on the corner of Davenport and Francis Ave, which is still yet to commence construction, but could commence immediately, should it choose a residential component along Burrows Road for 8 stories, which it could progress to shovel-ready instead of trying to increase its height to 15 stories. This legislation was not intended to allow developers such as the proponent concessions in increasing density and height well in excess of the existing statutory planning framework, but to speed up construction of commencement of those projects that actually do comply.
So the simple answer, I think, is no, but I'll get Mr Roddick to answer in a detailed version.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Mr Dines, for the question. Your question there raises a number of points. Many of these will be considered in the Responsible Authority report. The exemptions set out by the Minister's Planning Statement of Emergency Notice of Exemption signed 30th of April 2020 are not applicable to this development, as the proposal is not exempt from requiring development approval, which is why a development application is currently under assessment by the City. The Planning Development Act, as amended by the Planning and Development Amendment Act 2020, introduced a new Part 17 that grants the West Australian Planning Commission temporary decision-making powers to determine development proposals over $20 million in metropolitan Perth and over $5 million in regional areas. The City cannot control who applies for development approval through this process, nor does the City have any decision-making power under this process. Let's just clarify on some of those questions you raised in regards to the economic impacts of COVID-19. But as I said, Mr Dines, a number of other points you've raised will be considered through the Responsible Authority report. I'm more than happy to meet with you and discuss those further in detail prior to that.
Thank you. In the absence of my neighbour, I'd like to substitute my first 2 questions which have been answered. Could the Mayor please confirm the total number of properties within the 210 metres of the development application 19906 which received written community consultation notice from the City of Stirling for the proposed 9, 15 and 24-storey residential towers at the Carrinup Shopping Centre?
Thanks, and I'm sure we'll have to respond to you in writing for that one, Mr Dines.
Thank you. Secondly, could the Mayor please provide a breakdown of the properties which received the written community consultation notice, including A, a split between the number of residential and commercial properties, B, identifying how many notices effectively went to the same address, i.e. units in the medical centre or aged care facility, and C, how many properties were located within the extended community consultation notice area, being the additional 10 metres above the minimum 200 metres required?
Yes, we can respond to you in writing for that one, Mr Dines.
Thank you.
Leon Stored, please. Sorry, Leon. Emily Wallace.
Hi.
Just your name and suburb, thanks.
I'm speaking on behalf of my daughter Emily Wallace. My name's Louise Drayden. We live in Carrinup. Emily would like to know how long the traffic in our area is going to be so bad. She's no longer allowed to ride her bike to school or play in the front yard because there's too many cars and trucks.
I'm sorry, Emily, I can't give you a definite answer, but I'd say it's going to be another couple of years.
Yeah, maybe. She'd also like to make sure that the lovely Trigg bushland that we have near us is not going to be affected by these apartments that are being built.
Thanks. We'll certainly take that into consideration, Emily, and make sure they're not.
Okay. Her last question is that she goes to St Mary's Girls' School and she can see the cranes where they will build the apartments, and she can see how tall they're going to be from her school. So she's concerned, does that mean that people in the apartments are going to be able to see her at school?
Thank you for that comment, Emily, and that's a very good point. So we'll certainly take that on board as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Miles Harmer.
My question is about the Sporting Grant Fund.
Sorry, and just your name and your suburb.
Sorry, yes. Miles Harmer, Mount Lawley, yes. The decision to drop the Woodson Street location was presented to a briefing of councillors on the 26th of August 2019. And my question is, at what date had that decision to drop the Woodson Street location been made?
Thank you. Mr Littleton.
Thank you, Mr Harmer, for the question. Look, the decision to adopt the final location for the Hamer Park Clubroom was made by the city's democratically elected council. It was done so after extensive community consultation. The decision was not easy. It required council to weigh up the various factors involved, along with the differing views from within the community.
Mr Harmer.
The question was, what date was the decision made?
It was made at that council meeting. I'll respond to you in writing on that one, Mr Harmer.
Okay, because the 26th of August is before the council meeting. Okay, you'll respond in writing.
Yeah, I'll respond in
writing.
writing.
Thank you. But I do want the date. Okay, the findings of the Elton Consulting Report were that a large majority of participants still favour the Woodson Street location, and that the community questioned the governance and transparency of the decision to drop it. Have the governance and transparency of the decision to drop the Woodson Street location been reviewed?
No, they haven't, Mr Harmer. We're happy with the governance and transparency on the decision of this.
Okay.
Alison Bunker.
Alison Bunker, Mount Lawley. My question is in relation to item 12.1 RL1, the sporting grants. I note that you've prioritised the applications, obviously you have to prioritise them, but in September 2019, the Moyle Pavilion was considered the priority. It's now number 3, and Hamer is now number 1. Can somebody tell me why the priorities changed?
Yes. Mr Quirk.
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor, and thanks for the question, Ms Bunker. Yes, the difference with the decision to proceed with the design for the Moyle Pavilion prior to Hamer, previously made by Council, is not directly comparable to the report tonight. The report tonight is around the CSRFF funding. One of the key principles for that funding is participation, and so based on those principles, the participation will be greater given the clubs that will be based in the Moyle Pavilion. So that is the difference between the two decisions around the two reports. Tonight's report is aligned with the principles set by the Department of Local Government around the CSRFF.
Can I just clarify? So that doesn't... so the priorities...
It doesn't reflect the priorities of us doing the project.
And when they start work, fine. The other thing about that particular item tonight is there are a number of specific items under it, and each application has its own merits and different issues. I'm wondering if they should be considered separately rather than as a blanket thing.
No, so when we have to put them to council, we have to put them as priorities because there's one round at the CSRFF that comes up. So that it's not whether we want the items. These are all priority items for the city to go ahead with, and they're items that we'll look at funding through our budget processes. This is about prioritising, as Mr Quirk has said, in terms of how they're going to sit for the government department funding.
Okay, thank you. And the third question is, can I get a copy of the designs for the Moyle and Hamer pavilions, including the energy audits?
Yeah, we'll certainly take that on notice and then provide you with something.
Thank you.
Thank you. Monica Jarrett.
Good evening, thank you.
And just your name and suburb, please.
Oh, Monica Jarrett, Karrinyup. Will the City of Stirling provide a deputation to the JDAP for the Karrinyup West residential? And can the residents of Karrinyup also ask the majority of the councillors if they would sign a submission to JDAP opposing the proposed towers as they did for Yellow?
Thank you. I guess it hasn't got to that process yet, so it's probably a little premature. I'll get Mr Rodich to provide some comments on the process.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Ms Jarrett, for the question. This application, as I stated, has been called into council for consideration. At that point in time, the council will make a decision on either supporting this offer's recommendation or not. At that point in time, depending on the decision by council, council may also decide that the mayor or an elected councillor may provide a deputation to the JDAP.
That'd be great.
And just something with the Yellow, it was a very different situation. There wasn't enough time in between the submission that officers had to prepare and the JDAP for it to come to council with the timing of it, whereas this one will be called into council.
Okay, thank you very much. My next question is, are the City of Stirling satisfied that the current parking bays at Karrinyup Shopping Centre have been designed in accordance with the relevant Australian standards in relation to the multi-storey car parking being screened from the street by dense landscaping and the outside bays having 1 tree per 6 parking bays as required by the City's landscaping policy under the City of Stirling's Policy Manual 4.2 Mixed Use and Commercial Centre Design Guidelines. And in addition, are the bays currently used by the car detailing business included in the number of bays that would have been used for customers parking?
Thank you. Mr Rodich or Mr Littleton? No, Mr Rodich.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Ms Jarrett, for the question. The current parking bays that have been, I guess, cleared from the City of Stirling in terms of satisfying the development application would definitely comply with Australian standards. There's conditions which relate on those approvals to the standards, and we wouldn't clear a development unless it met those standards. Our internal engineer goes out to the site to inspect those, as well as the drawings provided to the city. So any part of the development that has been, shall we say, given clearance in a simple terms would comply with the relevant standards. In terms of your comment about the car detailing business, I'll have to probably take that on notice and provide comment back to you in writing. I can comment that there is a cap on this site for 880 car bays. I will provide comment to you if that includes or does not include the car detailing business car bays.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My final question, it's not quite in relation to Karrinyup, but it kind of is.
That's right.
Are the council supportive of having apartments hanging out washing on balconies, as is the case currently at the apartments at 1 Smith Street, Karrinyup, and will this also be permitted at the apartment towers being constructed at Karrinyup Shopping Centre, having 24, 15, 9 stories of smalls hanging out for everyone to see?
I guess it depends if you live next door to it, Ms Jarrett. Look, my understanding is that would come under the strata laws. I'll get Mr Rodich to provide some comment.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ms Jarrett, and thanks for providing those photos with your question. Explain your reasoning for the question. Closed drying areas need to be screened from public view, and I will be investigating this site and making sure that they do comply with their planning approval.
That was 3 times last week, I saw that.
And thank you for not sending the photos through to myself.
Oh, thank you.
And Councillor, we just need an extension before we move on. Councillor Proud, seconded Councillor Migdale, just a show of hands. That's unanimous. Thanks, councillors. Tony Jarrett.
Hi, it's Tony Jarrett, Karrinyup. I didn't know I was one of these, but I'm a NIMBY, naysayer and obstructor, and probably a lot of other derogatory terms the Premier used at an August Property Council of Australia function to describe people who don't want high-rise apartment towers overlooking their homes. Obviously, the Premier and Minister Saffioti won't be personally affected, but we will be. Could the city please confirm that senior decision makers of the city attended a Property Council of Australia function where they shared a table with senior reps of the AMP, perhaps Row Group and other stakeholders?
Yes.
The same organisations that are the developers for the apartment towers. Regardless, we don't want to know how the invites were generated or any of that, but how can the city assure the ratepayers that that doesn't compromise the impartial position they've maintained all along? They have to keep up. It looked terrible to us, and I mean, we're even starting to ask were any potential JDAP members at that. It's that bad.
Yeah, sure. And fair question, Ms. Jarrett. Look, we attend functions like that on a regular basis. I think it's very important for us to have a relationship not only with all the people who are investing in the city. I can tell you there was about 500 people in the room there, including probably every major developer in Western Australia. And let's not forget, companies like AMP, for example, are investing about $1.3 billion into the economy of Stirling. We were actually attended the event, and it was because the Premier and the Minister were speaking. We paid for our own tickets. I can tell you we're actually attending another event this Friday with the Planning Minister speaking, so it's a regular occurrence. But I can assure you it doesn't compromise us in any decision making.
Very good. At the same function, the Premier stated that NIMBYs, naysayers and objectors needed to be overcome as they stand in the way of good development, and that's their words. This suggests that our community's concerns are really struggling to stand a chance against the imperatives of the development industry, and it appears to us they're riding roughshod over the existing and established planning frameworks which we trust and appreciate that local government manages for us. How does the city propose to respond to and manage this directive? Because coming from the Premier himself, that's not a request, that's a directive to us.
Sure, and I think one of the, I can probably make the point that whilst we attended the lunch, it doesn't mean we agree with everything the Premier said at the lunch. I think those relationships with developers is one of the important ways that we ensure that not only does Stirling get the economic benefit of development, but those developers do choose to go through Stirling for the planning outcomes. And whilst it's probably hard to understand at this stage, and I get there's a lot of community concern, developers like this have the choice to go through WAPC and go direct through that process with that response. And right now we've got an outcome where the developer is going through Stirling and there is an opportunity for community to have their say and for council to have a decision. So that's a good outcome in this.
Yeah, we grasp at everything. It's just we've not got much to hold on to at the moment. Yep. Last one. The Responsible Authority report, and forgive me because I don't know the processes, but it's been called to council, we understand that, and it's, will that ever be made available to the public at some stage, either before or during or before it goes to JDAP?
Yeah, Mr. Roddish?
Thank you, Mr. Jarrett. In terms of the application being called into council, yes, it would be made public, usually I guess a couple of days before the council meeting. I can tell you that the Responsible Authority report will be provided 10 days in advance of the JDAP meeting, and at that point of time that will also be publicly available for the community to read and prepare their deputations for the JDAP meeting.
Very good, thanks very much.
Thank you. Roland Hadley.
Good evening, Roland Hadley, Woodlands. On the 19th of June of this year, $550,268 was paid to the MG Group. Was part of these funds spent on improving premises and the installation of a swimming pool at a property owned by a city official?
Ms Hawkins.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Mr Hadley. I'll certainly need to look into the details of that payment. I don't know the facility that relates to in terms of the city's facilities, but certainly not for an official.
Thank you. The only reason I ask this because the chart of accounts on this amount of money, which is what, 550,000, has only put down building construction materials and services, which is a very limited information on this vast amount of money.
Yeah, we're happy to provide you some information there, Mr Hadley.
Thank you. Question 2. In the 5-month period, April to August of this year, a total of $1,929,957 was paid to arborist companies, which is nearly $2 million. Has the city completed its tree planting program? If not, when? This growing industry will no doubt impact on the future budgets of the city.
Thank you. Yes, it will. Mr Littleton.
We're actually just commencing our new financial year tree planting program, but we certainly had completed our tree planting program last financial year. It might be best if I grab some additional information and send you something in writing just to let you know where the program is at.
Okay, thank you. And finally, 3 payments were made to Alphonse Malumba, $80, the Guelab Croatia Soccer Club, $100, and Giovanni Italiano, $80. All these are designated as council expenses. Can the Finance Department provide details and list the answers in the minutes?
Sure. Miss Hawkins might be able to provide some now.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. Thanks, Mr Hadley. With regards to 2 of those payments, that relates to returning of funds for the council election, so the administration fee to effectively participate in the council election. The other one is a donation to that particular club.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Hadley. Simon Wheeler. Just your suburb tonight, Mr Wheeler.
Yeah, good evening,
have to
Mayor,
break the habit.
councillors. Simon Wheeler, where do I live? Scarborough. Mayor Owen, at the last council meeting, it was proposed that questions on development assessment panels had nothing to do with council, that the city is not the decision maker, that you are not the droids that we're looking for. Yet it is council that creates the local planning schemes and policies that the DAP is legislatively required to pay due regard to as if it were the responsible authority. And the DAP standing orders allow for council deputations and addendums to responsible authority reports. And indeed the city's recommended refusal, commendably backed up by a deputation from council, I believe yourself, clearly had some effect in the Yellow Cafe DAP refusal. Mayor, it is a terminological inexactitude for councillors and staff to continually repeat the mantra that there is nothing council can do in regard to DAP decisions. So my question is,
so just for clarification, I'm not sure we say that, Mr Wheeler.
It was said several times during the debate last week, Mayor Owen.
No, we're not the planning authority, but we certainly acknowledge it's something to do with us, which is why everyone's here tonight.
That's correct, and you're constantly told we're not the planning. There was councillors. You're not the decision maker. There were councillors last week saying, why are these people coming here asking these questions which we can't answer?
Not during council they weren't, Mr Wheeler.
Oh, they were, and it's recorded, Mayor Owen, as well. So my question is, can you confirm tonight, for the benefit of ratepayers and councillors alike, what options the elected council has, should it resolve to do so, to influence DAP determinations and put to bed any vicious rumours of council's impotence?
Well, I think that's been made clear already tonight. Council has called this application in, if that's the one you're referring to.
I was congratulating you on the DAP, on the Yellow Cafe one as well, Mayor Owen. But
Thank you.
We still keep getting.
Yeah, and where there is
and
where there is significant community interest, the council will do its role, and the officers will do their responsible authority report. And if there's enough interest in the community or opposition, then I'm sure, like they have historically, councillors will call it in, so that council can form an opinion on it as well.
Fantastic. A similar thing, item 13.1 tonight, which is, I think, a DAP application. The applicants note that it is far more important to be contextually driven and respond to the actual built form rather than slavish compliance with a deemed to comply pathway under the R codes. Words they back up with, I stopped counting at 25 variations in setbacks alone on that application. It also calls to reduce the traditional mindset that the road is for cars and the footpaths are for people, because apparently these plans blur those lines. Mayor, multiple dwellings are a large feature of that locality, but the contextually driven aspect of this application appears to be that of cramming as many amenity-poor dwellings as possible onto the site. It is the developer's right to attempt to maximise return, but I think it's council's responsibility to provide for the good governance of the district. And I do not think that supporting such subpar development provides a legacy councillors might care to be party to. My question is, Mayor Owen, if councillors agree with those opposed, what specific options does council have tonight? For instance, can it modify, alter or amend the city's responsible authority report?
It can certainly make comments. I'll get Mr Rodich to provide some context.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Mr Wheeler, for the question. That application has been called into council tonight for consideration. The responsible authority report is written. The council can't change the officer's responsible authority report in terms of its content. What the council can do is either support the officer's recommendation or not. One interesting point, and I think you'll like this, is that there's been some recent changes to the DAP template that says that where there is a council resolution and where that differs from the officer's recommendation section of the report is placed at the end of the report, and the council's resolution, if it differs, is at the start of the report. That's one change with the recent, I guess, changes to the DAP template. So council can make a decision tonight if that is consistent with his officer's report or not. If it's inconsistent, then that becomes the responsible authority report recommendation, and the officer's recommendation is placed at the rear of the report.
I do like that. Good. Thank you. This has half been answered, Mayor Owen, but I'm already standing here. The Property Council of Australia is a well-funded lobby group representing developers and has lobbied to oppose minimum apartment standards, oppose increased fees for foreign investors, opposed land clearing restrictions, and calls for the rolling back of developer contributions to local infrastructure such as open space, roads and footpaths. AMP Capital, sponsors of a recent Property Council event, currently have a significant locality change in DAP application under assessment by the city, which relies in no small part on a favourable report by the city. Yet the city chose, well, you've now said you chose to sit at the applicant's head table. You've spoken previously of the need for the city to be impartial in planning decisions, Mayor Owen, and only those having lost all of their critical faculties would not raise an eyebrow or more at such a corroboree. My question is, which principles of impartiality, transparency or accountability were served by attending this meeting?
Thank you for that question, Mr Wheeler. And look, all I can say is that we attend these all the time, and developers are always there. If we didn't attend a function because a certain developer might be there who's developing in the city, we would never go to these functions. It was a very important function from our point of view. We got to sit up the front, which was fantastic, because on the next table was Development WA and the Minister and the Premier. I was invited to talk to the Premier and the Minister afterwards. We've got a lot of significant projects that are happening with the state government, so we see it as very strategic to be able to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Tom Webster.
Yes, good evening, councillors.
Just your name and
Tom
suburbs.
Tom Webster, Trigg.
Thank you.
Was the council aware that 10 million ploughed into solar energy will save ratepayers 70 million over the next 2 decades? That's a fairly initial modest outlay in an investment which would provide ongoing cost savings. As of 2018-2019, the City of Stirling has a 5% renewable energy as a percentage of total electricity consumption. In the minutes of council meeting, the City indicated that this investment of $621,000 over 7 years to provide PV systems to achieve 5% of total electricity consumption via renewable had a cost saving of $172,000, which equates to a 3.6...
Mr Webster, I am going to need a question, please.
Sorry?
I'm going to need a question, please, sir.
Well, yeah, sure. Look, if we invest $600,000 and we get a return on that of $172,000 per year, and if we invest 10 million and then we actually get a return of 3.5 million by putting renewable energy PVs on the council, on council roofs and getting 100% renewables, why are we not doing that ASAP? Because over 2 decades, that's a saving of $70 million for the ratepayers of Stirling.
Sure. Mr Littleton?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the question. Look, the city is actively exploring opportunities around solar PV, but not only solar PV, other renewable streams as well. Those actions were identified in our Sustainable Energy Action Plan, our corporate document that was recently closed for consultation, and the results of that consultation and ultimately the adoption of our SEEP corporate plan will come back to Council for consideration. So it's broad investment decisions around solar PV, power purchase agreements through Western Power, geothermal options, wind are all aspects of our sustainable streams that we're pursuing and are contained in that document.
Sure. When's that before Council?
It has been.
No, the approval of the actual Sustainable Energy Plan by Council.
The draft document was endorsed by Council for consultation, so that was some months ago. It has been through consultation. We're consolidating the outcomes of the consultation at the moment, and once that's completed, the matter will be returned to Council for final adoption.
Sorry.
But I can't give you an exact date.
This year or?
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. Darebin Council Climate Action Plan's committed to net zero emissions. They've achieved that with not just the council but the community as well, and they've put forward a solar saver program, which helps residents, business organisations to install solar panels, saving money. And they do it by 2 methods. One is pay an upfront cost, which is then given back to the council, or a different system where they'll advise people on how to get solar systems up, like advocating how to get good solar systems up, so that not just the corporate council will do this, the community does it as well to get zero
Mr
renewables.
Webster, I'm going to have to ask you to ask a question. I'm happy to take.
I'm
happy to organise a meeting though. If you want to come in and sit down and go through this with us, I'm happy to organise a meeting offline.
I'm just about there. Will council consider this as a further improvement to its environmental programs?
Mr Littleton.
Yeah, thank you. Look, the city acknowledges that its approach to supporting community to engage in in sustainable energy actions is also a critical element. We are currently preparing a sustainable energy action plan for our community. That plan is currently in draft form at the moment, and our intent is to again present that to council and the broader community for consideration. It will contain a number of actions that we're currently working through at the moment to assist community to engage in this space.
Thank you, sir. My last question: Australian Local Government Climate Review 2018 measured corporate emissions, and 22% of the councils that were which were reviewed came up with plans which the following actions were made. 47% said they would buy bulk solar PV for residents. 44% said they'd advocate for community renewable energy. 14% said rebates for residential commercial solar. Will Stirling Council show leadership and adopt similar policies?
Thank you. Mr Littleton.
Look, our Sustainable Energy Action Plan corporate sets aspirational targets to reduce our energy emissions by 70%, and to engage in sustainable energy to mitigate our energy by 100%. Just looking for those targets at the moment, but we think that we are setting aspirational targets that will lead in this space. As I said, if you wanted to have a look at the draft document, you'll see all of those, all of that information in there. You're more than welcome to lodge a submission for us in this space for consideration in our final preparation of our final document.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Webster. And councillors, we're just in the extension. We just got one more question. So, Councillor Proud, seconded Councillor Lagan. Just show of hands. Unanimous. Thanks, councillors. Paul Collins. Thank you. And just your name and suburb, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Paul Collins of Dianella. Mr Mayor, I understand there are rumblings from some of the councillors you lead about the length of question time, with some suggesting a maximum time limit and some suggesting a cut to the number of questions per constituent. I believe you handle question time very well. In fact, the best for quite some time we've had as a mayor. But ratepayers only have this opportunity at most twice a month, and in some months only once, and never in January. Wouldn't it be ironic that as the city's first elected mayor, you led a council that decided to reduce ratepayer involvement during question time?
That would be ironic, wouldn't it? Yes. I can assure you some of the rumblings came from all of us after last council meeting when we all got home at midnight, Mr Collins, but we've all got over it.
Mr Mayor, thank you for that. Glad everyone's over it. Mr Mayor, my second question. In the interests of transparency and accountability, could you please name the other attendees who dined with you, the CEO and the Director of Planning, on AMP Capital's table at the Property Council luncheon on 28 August 2020, as well as each attendee's employer and involvement, if any, in the Karrinyup Shopping Centre West Towers development application?
Sure, and I'm not sure of the names of the people on there, but I do know it was AMP with a major sponsor of the Property Council lunch, and there was their planner was on their table, Greg Rowe, as has been mentioned tonight. There was also someone from AMP and I think Blackburn.
No worries.
And I'm sure the list, I don't think the list is secret.
I'm just after that. Presumably you could ask AMP Capital to provide that information?
Yeah, I don't think it's a secret.
No, thank you. And Mr Mayor, my third question. Mr Mayor, who invited you, the CEO and the Director of Planning, to sit on AMP Capital's table at the Property Council luncheon on 28 August 2020? And how and when was that invitation made?
I can provide that. Hello? Yep. My understanding, we had the invitation from the Property Council, as we do from all the different organisations that run those sort of events, to come to the Premier's event. We accepted and we paid for our own tickets. AMP then, as the sponsor of the event, asked us to sit up the front. And we were on their table. On their table? Yes.
Okay. And when was that invitation made?
I'll provide that in writing.
And how was that invitation made?
I'll have to provide that in writing. I'm assuming it wasn't a phone call if that's what you're asking.
No, I'm wondering, like, was it by chance whilst you were walking in to sit at the back on the free tables and then AMP Capital said, hey, look, we got 3 spare seats. Do you want to come and sit at the front? Or was it planned by AMP Capital in the sense that...
Thanks, Mr Collins. I get what you mean. No, it was a formal invitation.
Planned formal invitation?
It was a formal invitation.
Okay. And that invitation was...
We're not in a court, Mr Collins. Have you got another question?
No? Well, I'm going to get... I just want to... The question was when was the invitation made and how? Because we've got the who bit.
I will provide all of that in writing for you, Mr Collins, so you have it correctly.
Thank you.
But again, there is no secret to that attendance at that event. I can tell you, as I said before, we're going to another lunch this Friday with the Minister for Planning as well.
Have you...
And they are all public, and I put them in my Friday update to councillors, so they all know I'm going to these functions.
I just wanted to know if it was a conscious decision to sit on that table, because I think it comes
I knew
down,
exactly what I was doing, Mr Collins.
I think it comes down to a question of impartiality, that's all.
No, no, I don't think it does, Mr Collins. I think it's really important to understand that, as I said, we meet with developers all the time. It's not for debate, Mr Collins.
No, I'm just listening.
We meet with developers all the time. I can tell you, if we're talking business, then it is in the office with probity officers. We do not sit at these things, and I think if there's film of that actual event, you will see. We were sitting there listening to the Premier the whole time.
Thank you.
All right, I've got microphones everywhere. Here we go. It's like a news conference now. Thank you everyone for your patience. We'll now move on to item 8, which is applications for leave of absence. Councillors, are there any requests for leave of absence? Councillor Farrelly. This is it. This is the bit.
Gosh, I'm glad you asked me. Yes, I wish to have a leave of absence. Can you hear me when I talk this high?
Yes, yep.
Yeah, oh,
Yep.
right. I wrote it down somewhere to get the right date and I haven't got it. Friday this week, so I think that's about the 11th to the 18th. I'll be back for my dinner invites.
Right, Friday the 11th to the 18th.
Yes.
Noted, councillor. Is there any other application for leave of absence? If not, can I have a mover and a seconder to accept those? Move Councillor Boothman, seconder Councillor Spagnolo. And just a show of hands, councillors, noting that is unanimous, noting that Councillor Caddy, Councillor Ferrante and Councillor Migdale have left the chamber. Thank you. I'll go on to item 9, which is confirmation of minutes. Councillors, can I please have a mover and a seconder to accept the council minutes of the 25th of August 2020? Move Councillor Lagan, seconded Councillor Spagnolo. Can I just have a show of hands, councillor, to accept those? Councillors, we're just voting on the minutes. Thank you. That is unanimous. Again, noting that Councillor Caddy, Ferrante and Migdale are out of the chamber. Item 11, unresolved business from previous meetings. I have nil. Sorry, did I do announcements by the presiding member? Yeah. No, if I can go back to that, because I think I had a couple of things there. So I will go back and I'll just start announcements before I hand over to Councillor Farrelly, just to mention that we do have 2 students from Notre Dame University. Oh, no. We had a massive impact on them. They've left. Maybe they're online watching. Okay, I will go to Councillor Farrelly. I believe you have an announcement.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you. On the City of Stirling was announced the winner of the Best Major Event category at the 2020 Parks and Leisure Australia WA Awards of Excellence. And I understand you've attended the 2020 Awards of Excellence, and I'm sure you're very pleased to be there and hear the announcement that the City of Stirling was announced the winner of the Best Major Event for 2020. This is in regard to the Scarborough Beach Sunset Veranda, which a number of people, I'm sure, within the community would have attended. There were 105 diverse acts and events, including cabaret, comedy, music, interactive workshops, and family-friendly activities and performance. The season attracted a record-breaking crowd of 16,500 people to Brighton Reserve across the 20 days, 17th of January to the 16th of February this year, just before we had the COVID. So that was a wonderful participatory time to have before we all closed up. I personally went to some of those events, and I have to say, I think that was the best year we've had so far. Since its first year in 2015, this has been a vibrant and exciting event, and it has supported a lot of local, national and international artists. It has also been designed and supported in a manner now that they had the Art Space Collective doing a lot of the painting and things around the place, and also being held up by my colleague is the award. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Customer and Communications Business Unit for their hard work throughout the year. And I will present this certificate to Council. I understand I'll come to you.
To the Mayor. Take it up to the Mayor. Shake his
Thanks for that, Councillor Farrelly. I'll now move on to item 11, which is unresolved business from previous meetings. I have nil. Item 12, reports and recommendations of committees. Councillors, will now move to the Community and Resource Committee items. Any alternative motions that were submitted to Governance prior to 12 p.m. today have been included together with your running sheet. Items 12.1 PRS2, item 12.1 TE1, and item 12.1 TE2 are required to be pulled out. Are there any other items that you wish to pull out? Councillor Proud?
Page 9, 12.1 RL1.
Councillors, are there any other items that you wish to pull out this evening? No other items? In that case, I will go to 12.1 RL1. Yeah, I know, but so be chair. Who's the deputy chair of Community and Resource? Okay, I will go to. I'll go to the deputy chair of the Community and Resource.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I thank the birthday girl when she arrives back. I would like to move the committee's recommendation.
This is live
on
stream,
page
Councillor Sargent.
10.
Thank you. And I'll go to Councillor Proud on this one because I know there's a second with a slight amendment, and then I know that Councillor Proud.
Thank you. I'm happy to second that. Fully support this. I would like to add a number 2, if we could have that on the board. That Council considers listing as part of the 2021-22 budget an additional 1/3 city contribution to a total contribution value of $223,634 in the event that the CSRFF application is unsuccessful for Wembley Downs Tennis Club resurfacing and floodlight installation. The reason for change: to ensure the ongoing success and future sustainability of the Wembley Downs Tennis
Councillor
Club.
Sargent, as mover of the substantive motion, are you happy just to
Very
include
happy,
that?
Mr. Mayor.
Right, Councillor Ree, I know you've got an alternative motion. Yeah, I don't want it. I just want to know. So you have got an alternative you want to put up? So it's just we have to go into debate. So you're opposing, or are you happy with this now? Or?
I'd like the officers to make a comment with regard to my alternative, which is
No,
changing the
your
priority.
alternative doesn't exist at the moment. So we've got a motion on the table here. I'm saying if you'd like to put an alternative, then you're going to have to go against this so we can go to debate.
Fine, thank you. I'll go against.
Yes? Are you?
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This got quite a lot of debate at committee, and it had a number of points about the priority and the listings and whatnot. I don't have an issue of any of that tonight. The one thing that I was a little concerned about was the Wembley Downs Tennis Club. This is their 3rd attempt at trying to get this type of funding, and to the point where I actually gave Councillor Proud a phone call last week saying, look, is there anything we can do on this one? And she was already onto it, Mr. Mayor. She'd already phoned the officers, and that's where the recommendation number 2 comes into it. So I'll end with that, and I'll let Councillor Proud add some more.
Councillor Proud.
Thank you. Would you like to join the Double B ward, Councillor Sargent? Thank you. This did generate a lot of debate last week. I understand Councillor Ree would like to change their priority. My understanding is, on long discussions with the officers, it's not going to hold any weight with the Department of Sport and Rec. Also, getting the priority change and make it number 1, let's just look at what the 1, 2 and 3 are.
Let's debate this. Nothing's on the table yet.
It's going to be argued, and that's a fair comment. It's a fair comment, Mr. Mayor. I don't think it holds any weight in what order it is. The officers have got it in a priority order as number 4. What I'm proposing is, all this is to go to consideration for budgets in 2021-22 for the consideration of exactly what was in red below. So this is a way, as Councillor Sargent has mentioned, this is the 3rd time, and there's every indication with the lack of competing priorities for DSR, the lack of funding provided by the state government for CSRFF funding, 12 million across the whole state. We've got 4. Imagine what Joondalup, Wanneroo and every other metro and regional council have got. So the pickings are very slim, and we would be very lucky to get it. Hopefully we'll get 1, 2 or 3. We'd be really lucky to get the 4. I don't think we're going to be that lucky. So talking with the officers, what can we do? Have put this forward,
Thanks,
Mayor.
Councillor Proud. Councillor Ree.
Thank you. Is it possible to put up my alternatives, please?
Sorry.
We've got to debate this.
No, we've got to debate this item. We've got to debate this item, but basically, if you can talk to, you're basically trying to change the priorities. So I'm happy for you to discuss.
Okay. One of the reasons that I've suggested it is instead of reversing the priority, that we have Wembley Downs Tennis Club 1, Moyle Pavilion 2, Careen 3, Hamer Park 4. And the reasoning behind that is, one, because Wembley Downs Tennis are 61 years old next year, and they have had 60 years old, sorry, and they've had very little funding at all from the city, and they seem to be prejudiced against when it comes to the funding. And it's very difficult in a club these days, especially with COVID, and any club to sit there and try to raise more than even $10,000 at the moment to pay their bills. So to me, and the fact that they've already been 3 times up, but they've always been at the bottom of the priority. They haven't been at the top. And so that really concerns me as well. And because of their continuity in the community, unlike some of the others, I do believe that they show that they are prepared to put their money where their building is, and they should be rewarded as such. And so that's why I think they should be number 1. If you reverse the order, especially the fact that Hamer Park is the last one to come on board, why should they be the first one to get funding? And yes, I can understand Mr. Quirk's comment earlier on about the policies by the department, but, you know, we all know what policies mean. So, you know, I just don't believe, I believe it should go the other way. Also, if we go to the lower ones first and they're more expensive to the end, I think we'd be more inclined to get some more money rather than sitting there, number 1 priority. That's millions for us. Whereas if we went the other way, we could get 3 projects off the ground, which would create more jobs, which would actually be in the long run better for the city and would actually function to more ratepayers than one lot. So that concerns me. And it's got nothing to do with whether it's Hamer, Careen or whoever it is. It's purely the fact of looking at the value of the money, where it is. I just think it would go a lot better reversing it. My second motion was regarding much on the same lines, which, you know, I won't comment on, but anyway, how these things happen. Much on the same lines. However, I was going to say that it is still, as I said, unfair that the club misses out. The second motion that Proud has put up is good as well. Unfortunately, it has to go to.
I think it was Councillor Sargent.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Sargent. The second motion I think is important as well because I do think that it's been totally unfair. So I would have to support it. And round the table, because of what goes on, I don't think I could actually sit there.
Councillor, what does that mean?
Well, what goes on, I don't think we could vote away from this because of what Mr. Quirk has said. We can't. We can't go on any further.
Let's be very clear. Mr. Quirk extensively covered this in committee meeting and explained the process for CSRFF funding, and it was a unanimous decision by committee to put this recommendation forward. So let's be clear, this was all above board and it was done at a committee recommendation, which you voted for. Continue.
My point is, what goes on with the department, we don't have a choice. We can't separate them out. We, as all these, us councillors around the table, we want to support our community. I'm just saying we suggest in a different order. Mr. Quirk is saying we can't really go in a different order for what goes on in the department. So we're actually locked in. I mean, it would be terrible for any councillor not to support this motion because all of our community needs it. What I'm just concerned about is the order and how we do it. And maybe it's a policy thing from the department that we should look at because it is out of our control. We can't control what goes on in a lot of ways, but I do believe we should be able to say at the table the smaller little projects that really affect our community should get more runs on the board than the bigger ones. And I know he's made the comment the other way, but to me, in the community, it would work that way. So that's why I think I'd hope everyone around the table would support it. and that's why I'm not against it, but just against the fact that I thought that the motion, the priority the other way, would work better.
Okay, so noting that there is a foreshadowed motion that Councillor Pratt has put up, Councillor Ree's put up, that's in the reverse. I'll now, if there's no indication, go to Councillor Lagan.
I just had a question on the item, through you to officers. Can officers confirm that were we to take on that point 2, that would give us a total of $335,000 that the City of Stirling would be funding? Is that correct?
Sorry, if we take on priority 2.
No, the additional in the alternative motion that talks about council considers a listing of 2021-22 budget, an additional 223.
Yep.
Do we add that 223 to the already 101,817?
Mr.
No,
Quirk.
no, of the City of Stirling.
Mr. Quirk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the outcome would be that the city would fund 223,634. The department would fund the 111,817.
So it's an additional, sorry, it's lifting the 111 to 223.
223.
Yep.
Can I just ask, is a clarification here, being a third, is that the club still puts it in and by putting it on the budget it goes ahead? Or is it that
No,
the
that's
club
my
doesn't
next-
put anything in and then it goes to the next round?
That's my next question.
Maybe if we can just go to the mover and seconder, is the intent of this that the club still covers its 1/3 and this means it will go ahead if it...
Mr. Mayor, I'll be very clear. So should DSR not come through with the third of 111,
Yep.
that the city pick that up along with the 111 they're already going to pay, and the club still pays their 111.
Yeah, so we'll go
we pick
ahead.
up the 223,
Thanks.
and the club still goes for
Okay.
111.
Does that answer the question?
It does actually match the figure I was talking about. My second question through you, Mr. Mayor, is would this motion result in any delay in the application to the LGCSI considerations, or could it cause a delay, which might then cause a delay in priority 1, 2, 3?
No, I don't believe it could. No. It can't cause a delay. This is only, it's going in, the priorities are going in. This is a separate item, number 2, that's saying if it doesn't, basically if it's not successful, we'll consider funding.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I just make a comment? When elected members speak of other elected members around the table, could you address them as councillor, please?
Sure, thanks, Councillor. Okay, with that, I will go to the mover of the motion to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be quick. Councillor Reid talked a lot about the priorities. I think that's been hashed out quite well, as you said, Mr. Mayor, at committee, and Mr. Quirk has actually highlighted why these priorities are in priority 1, 2 and 3. The number 2 recommendation, I do wholeheartedly support. The club's obviously willing to put its money where its mouth is. It's missed out on 3 rounds, and I think it's us telling that club tonight that no matter what happens, council's behind you and does support you, and we're willing to look at it at the next year's budget. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks for that, and with that, that closed debate. So I will put item 12.1 RL1, move Councillor Sargent, seconded Councillor Proud, noting a foreshadowed motion from Councillor Reid. If you can go to the vote, councillors. Thank you, councillors, and that is unanimous. We'll now go on to item 12.1 PRS2, car parking agreement with Woolworths Group, Proprietary Limited on Grindelford Drive, Balcatta, noting it's been referred to council. Also noting that Councillor Sandri has a financial interest and will leave the room, and Councillor Ferranti also is leaving the room. Financial interest. And we'll go to Councillor Migdale as chair of the committee.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the committee's recommendation.
So the committee's recommendation is referred here. Are you saying you'd like to move that it be deferred?
Yes, apologies. I'd like to move to hold it over to the next CNR, please.
As per the white paper that council has received?
Yes.
Seconded, Councillor Spagnolo. There is a procedural motion, so noting that Councillor Sandri and Ferranti are out of the chamber, I will put that to the vote. And we're just waiting for Councillor Migdal. Thank you, and that is unanimous, thank you. So that will be held over to the next council meeting. So we'll just pause until they come back in the room.
Councillor Sandri stays there.
Yep. There he is. All right, councillors, we will now go to item 12.1 TE1, the tender for panel painting, panel repair and recovery services. It's been pulled out as a financial interest. Councillor Sandri is out of the chamber. Councillor Ferranti has returned. Councillor Migdal is chair of the committee.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and I will move the committee recommendation, please.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for the committee recommendation, councillors? Councillor Perkoff, is there anyone opposed? If not, I will put that item. And that is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Well, now,
She's just indisposed of sensible text.
we will just carry on, councillors. So I'll go to item 12.1 TE2, the tender for the North Beach Rugby League Club upgrades and new store. An absolute majority vote is required on this one. Councillor Migdal is chair of the committee.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and again, I will move the committee recommendation, please.
And Councillor Caddy has seconded that. Is there anyone opposed to this one? If not, I will put that. Also noting that Councillor Sandri has not returned. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Migdal, would you now like to move the balance of reports, please?
Thank you, Mayor. I move the balance of reports by
Thank
exception
you.
resolution.
Councillor Sargent is seconding. I will put that to the vote, councillors. Thank you, and that is unanimous, councillors, noting that Councillor Sandri is still out of the chamber for the vote. Members of the gallery and those at home, please be advised that the remainder of the Community and Resource Committee recommendations have been adopted by exception resolution. Councillors, we will now move on to the Director-Council reports. And we'll go to, first to item 13, 13.1, proposed 24 group...
Mr Mayor, before you think, I should declare a impartiality interest in this item because I represent council on the JDAP and likely will be sitting on this panel, and on that basis I don't think it appropriate at this stage for me to form an opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Boothman, that's noted and you've done the paperwork.
And thanks, Mr Mayor. I too have to leave the chambers as I'm a member of JDAP.
Okay, Councillor Migdale's also declared an interest for JDAP. Just fill the paperwork out. Councillor Ree.
I can declare, but I doubt I'll be represented. I'll be called, so I can fill out the paperwork, but I doubt I'll be called on the day as an impartial.
Thank you, Councillor Ree. Councillor Farrelly, you'd like to do the same?
I should probably, yes, as a deputy, I'm sure that the other two are filling out the forms.
So if Councillor Ree and Councillor Farrelly are declaring an impartiality as they are deputy for the JDAP, but they are both electing to stay in as they're unlikely to be used. Can you please both do the paperwork? Make sure you fill that out. Councillor Migdal and Councillor Boothman are leaving the chamber. And we'll now go on to item 13.1, which is a proposed 24 group dwellings, lot 10, house number 89, Hersman Parade in Wembley on page 117. Do I have a mover of a motion, please? Councillor Ree.
Oh, sorry.
What would you like to move?
I'd like to move, I'd like to move that the council does not endorse the City Responsible Authority report to the Metro Inner North Joint Development Assessment Panel, and recommends non-approval of the proposed 24 group dwelling, Lot 10, house number 89, Herdsman Parade, Wembley, please, given that there's no time to actually hold it over.
Sure. Probably just because it's so different than we would need a reason. Have you got a reason why? So just sorry, your microphone, and then just read out the reason.
Sorry. One of the main reasons is with regard to the parking, the parking issues, the car parking bays, the visitors parking, with the traffic management.
Let's keep something really simple so we can get it typed up here.
Okay.
So the parking issues that will be created from the development.
Parking and traffic issues that will be created.
Yep.
Parking and traffic issues that will be created from the development.
Yep.
And that will have a adverse effect on the amenity
Of the area.
plus the City of Stirling has not received confirmation, not received comment, go for comment from the town of Cambridge, who shares this border. So
Who shares the road. Yep.
shares the road, shares the development border. I don't know how you want to say that. I think the road. Okay, go for
Sure.
the road.
Yep. All right, and we can change the words around a little bit. So at this stage, let's just get a comment from the director. Just make sure that's all okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Ree, the city have written to the town of Cambridge regarding the development during the consultation period and received no comment from the town of Cambridge. In addition to that...
So technically she's right.
So in addition, that we've also written to residents across the road from the town of Cambridge, and this is why we've had some submissions from them in respect to the development.
Maybe, Mr. Mayor, with your consideration that we could write the not received a comment from the town of Cambridge, who share the road. However, the town of Cambridge ratepayers have actually objected to the development.
Oh, I don't know if we can...
Because it wasn't the City of Stirling, because it was the other side of the road that they objected, that we had to contact. Yep. I don't know if you wanted to bother writing that in, but I think...
I don't think it needs that for the reason here. I think if we just leave...
Well, the city received objections, majority of objections.
Yep. All right. So the intent's clear on that. Is there a seconder for that motion? Yep, Councillor Thornton. Is there anyone opposed? Councillor Caddy? That's right. Councillor Ree, you can now debate that.
Thank you. Just to make it quite clear, I think we need, however, the City of Stirling, just because we're talking to councils here, the City of Stirling did not, City of Stirling received objections, just in case, Town of Cambridge actually does come back with a comment. I think there's quite a few issues that we've got here. One, which was raised earlier by other people, was regard to the balconies, which is a bit of a concern. I don't know if they've got any smalls, but we have had other residential properties go up in close proximity to other residents, and balconies are becoming an issue. These properties are quite small. They don't have a lot of landscaping area-wise, so I think that may be an issue. Also, on page 148, it talks about the sustainability of the property, and it says that in terms, and this is quoting from our design panel, built environment, the terms of the internal amenity for the occupants, the development does not provide optimal access to natural light in the habitable rooms. And there is approximately, 12 out of 24 of these units don't get any sun. 12 out of 24. I think that's quite significant. I think if they went back to, and if the design panel actually says that, if we went back to maybe 16 or something, I think it wouldn't be so harsh, not only the people living there and their well-being, but the neighbourhood that is also getting reduced sunlight. On page 131, we have the comment about the public submissions, and that actually says 83% actually were against it of the people who took the time to actually make a comment. Now, I know with the amenity of the area, they say, well, there's already units, they're huge, it doesn't matter, shove another one in. But just because there's a whole lot of units doesn't mean we have to have more. Doesn't mean that we have to make them packed in like sardines. This could be a nice development if they just reduce the amount of units on it, increase the amount of greenage in it. And I mean, to me, these are, if we're going to design, we're going to approve things, and we've got a design panel, we should be listening to them. On page 132, it makes the comment about the parking and the issues associated with parking. That the visitor car parking bays can only be accessed via the intercom, which will give considerable issues. Now, I know Mr. Crouch isn't here, but I'm not quite sure if Mr. Quirk knows, but there has been complaints concerning the parking in that street. We've got a physio in close proximity, right adjacent, next door. We've got a cafe, which I can't think of its name at the top of my head, and a physio. They have had reduced parking. Parking is already an issue now. Whole Herdsman Parade, there is parking issues. People parking everywhere. What they're saying in here, if you want a visitor, you have to come on inside. Well, how many people aren't going to do that? What if the visitor parking bays are already used? That, to me, is an issue. I think the problem also is the fact that, you know, the staff had 78 days in which to do it, to look at the proposal, and I know it's difficult because there's a lot on, and take it out for advertising, and then sit there and try to get into council. A lot of the ratepayers were waiting until the planning meeting for it to come up. Didn't even realise that it was on the agenda, because this is a community resource. So that's an issue. And before I go on, I'd just like to check, did every one of the people that objected, did they actually get contacted to know the meeting was on today, please?
Mr. Rodich?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, Councillor Ree, they did. All submitters were notified by the city last Tuesday.
Councillor Ree?
They were informed last Tuesday it was on, but as councillors didn't get informed until Saturday? Is that correct?
Mr. Rodich?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Ree, the agenda was published on Friday. Officers don't write usually to elected members telling them what is on the council agenda.
Councillor Ree? Who called it in? You called it in. So you're aware it was going to come to council?
At a planning meeting,
Yeah.
not at a community resource meeting.
Okay.
Wasn't aware that it was going to pop up this week, and I didn't know.
Well, it's here.
I know, it's all exciting, isn't it? But it's good that ratepayers know things before councillors. I think that's important. On page 153, it concerns me about the traffic modifications to the medium strip. This approval is based on cars going in and out, ingress and egress, which I think is still an issue given that shop right next door. But bearing in mind we don't own the road, and we haven't had a comment
30 seconds.
We haven't had a comment from Cambridge. Are we legally allowed to approve this application when we don't own the road to say whether it can be changed or not?
We're not approving the application, though.
In our report to approve it, I meant that if we don't have authority on that road.
Yes. Okay. So we now have Councillor Thornton, who seconded.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure if the council can endorse this responsible authority report based on the overwhelming objections contained in this, in the agenda. Also, I fear that we're creating, heat sink after heat sink in our suburbs, and some suburbs are more inundated with these heat sinks and others. And I have also a concern about the mature trees located on this property as well. They're precariously located along the boundary and also the easement. I noticed that there's a tree protection order on this development, but what's going to happen to the trees, you know, after the development? Who's going to be responsible for those trees? Are we able to put in conditions on those as well? And the other point I want to make is these sorts of complexes too are notorious for Airbnb being used for short-term stay. Is there something that we can do to protect long-term residents of these properties and stop the exploitation by short-term accommodation operators?
Yep, Mr. Roddick.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for the question, Councillor Thornton. There is a condition on the RAR relating to the retention of those 6 significant trees. So it's a condition 9 of the approval, and that must be satisfied there by the applicant with a tree protection plan to be considered prior to construction of the development to the city's satisfaction, and those trees are required to be kept as part of the development. So the other question was
the short-term accommodation, Airbnb.
This is an application for group dwelling development. That's what we're approving today. Any consideration of short-term accommodation would require a separate application to the city at a future date. We can't consider something which we don't have in front of us.
Councillor Thornton, you okay?
Yes, thank you for that.
Councillor Caddy.
Thank you. And I'm going to foreshadow the officer's recommendation that we endorse their responsible or authority report. This is a development that the officers support. It is totally in keeping with the other developments in this vicinity. In fact, it actually looks like a really nice development looking at the built form. We've only had 6 submissions, 5 of which were opposed, 1 in favour, which doesn't show a lot of community interest in this, so it suggests that it's not a particularly contentious development. I do have a question about the removal of the traffic island. Could I have some comment from the officers about how the... we're refusing to let them remove that traffic island. What is the impact of that upon residents' ability to enter to turning right? So what will now be the situation if we do not allow them to remove that island, please?
Mr. Roddick.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Caddy, this will mean that it's only left in, left out of this development. That was considered by the city's engineering business unit, and their professional comment on this part of the application was that the median island should remain. The median island has a significant tree as well within it, and they were satisfied that left in, left out was appropriate for this form of development in terms of vehicle access for residents to the site, but also for you know, the bin access and waste collection for the site.
Councillor Caddy.
Thank you. Look, I don't necessarily support that, but it's not at our... we can't make changes to the responsible authority report. By and large, I support the recommendation by the officers. I think this is a completely appropriate dwelling type for its area. It's certainly not much different from a lot of the other developments that are in this area. It does front onto quite a busy road. I don't think the additional traffic is going to make any difference whatsoever. I think the parking arrangement where you've got some bays external, visitor parking, some bays external to the gate and some internal, does provide a good balance. So, look, I have no problems endorsing the responsible authority report.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Yep. Go to Councillor Sandry first, and then I've got you, Councillor Farrelly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a question. Did this, I just couldn't tell in the report, did the item go to the design review panel?
Mr. Roddick.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, it didn't go to the design review panel. Group dwelling development, in most instances, doesn't go to the design review panel.
From recollection, the policy says above 12 or 10 group dwellings will go to design review panels. Any reason why we're not applying the policy?
Mr. Roddick.
Or was that 10 multis? Am I getting confused?
I don't know. Would you like me to get a response for you, Mr. Roddick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Sandry, that's the consultation procedure you're thinking of. The terms of reference just says group dwellings, so it doesn't have a number on it.
Okay, so there was an opportunity for this to go to design review panel.
No.
They excluded.
Oh, they're excluded. Okay, but the officers can put it to design review panel.
He didn't go.
I know, but what, I guess what's the reasoning? It's 24 group dwellings. It's not an application of 10. It needs to be considered under SPP 7.0. I'm just curious as to why we wouldn't put something like this.
Chair, councillor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the Manager of Development Services does have discretion to put such applications to the design review panel. We were comfortable with the design. We were comfortable that the officers could suitably assess this application against those design principles.
Okay. Just briefly, just in terms of the conditions which the officers may want to just consider for future RARs, seeing as we don't get to look over them very often, but when referencing the landscaping plan in condition 8, whether it's appropriate to actually put the date and the revision number of that landscaping plan so there's no toing and throwing into the future. And also condition 21, just the terminology rest of the development, probably want to stipulate what type of finish we want on the boundary walls. But I don't need comment, just for reference. And I'd just like to say that I think that, you know, group dwellings, in my opinion, often provide a suboptimal outcome compared to multiple dwellings. However, it is something that can be considered in the zone. It's a permitted land use and they're fully entitled to develop the site accordingly. I think the retention of six significant trees, the planting of 10 advanced trees and the planting of 2 new trees in the verge, plus the additional areas of landscaping in itself is is actually a very good outcome for this type of development and is probably rarely seen currently for large group dwelling development. So I'll probably be supporting the foreshadowed motion. Thank you.
Councillor Farrelly.
I've really got a question, and maybe I should have asked before, but in terms of the multi-use of the interior road and play areas, who has precedence if you're doing the hopscotch? And is that a common thing that is included within these designs?
Mr. Roddick. Who has precedence on the driveway, the kids or the cars?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd hope there would be consideration of both. This is a communal street with landscaping, slow points within the driveway. As pointed out in the RAR, hopefully this creates a sense of community, and I hope both kids and drivers can properly access the site.
If I may, through you, Mr. Mayor, ask another question.
Sure.
In regard to the sustainability and the fact that the artificial light is going to be used in, I think it was about 10 of those units out of the 24, and we're trying to promote a sustainability outcome in the city, are we actually sending an incorrect message to, I think, to the external governing bodies such as the JDAP, who will get the impression that we approve these on one context and we may not approve them on another? Is this going to set a precedence of artificial light is not a concern, as opposed to at least some sunlight coming, some natural light coming into those apartments? Or should they be re-looking at where they're putting those apartments?
I can answer some of that. There's no precedence in planning. Thank you. Mr. Roddick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for answering that. Look, the applications are considered on its merits. As pointed out in the RAR, there are a certain number of dwellings which have really sufficient light. Some may not. I think we've got to look at, on balance, is this development suitable against the whole planning framework applicable to the site, and it's the officer's recommendation that it is. I guess a key point of this development is that group dwelling development is a permitted use on the site, and we do need to consider this development against that planning framework, which largely this development satisfies in most regards.
Councillor Farrelly, you finished?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I've just been pointed out by my fellow councillor about the balconies, where it does have natural light. But I do believe that we have expectations of buildings. Quite a few high-rise buildings are happening around the city, and we need to set I believe we should be setting an example of what we regard as important, and the sustainability of preserving so the wellness of your population is by enabling natural light to come into your buildings. And if we're going to start setting precedents in areas that have traditionally got these higher density buildings, such as they do around Hurstman Lake, which is more a historical context when it was around a mosquito-infested lake, I don't believe that we should hold this as the thing that we base our expectation on for future planning assessments. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Spagnolo.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. What I was going to ask was, we mentioned that, or I think the Director mentioned that we hadn't heard back from the town of Cambridge. What I'd like to know is, what is the impact, like they haven't responded, if we endorse this evening and obviously proceed with what we're doing, is it going to have, or is it going to make any difference to the application? I mean, we've done the right thing, we've approached the town of Cambridge, but they haven't responded.
Mr Roddick.
Through you, Mr Mayor, that's correct, Councillor Spagnolo. We've written to the town of Cambridge and they provided no comment within that consultation period. If we do receive something from the town of Cambridge before the application is considered by the Joint Development Assessment Panel, I see no reason why we wouldn't provide that to the JDAP. In this regard, in terms of the impact, I guess it's a town of Cambridge Road, Hurstman Parade. Our engineering team have reviewed the proposal in terms of the impact on that road. There was no impact from our engineering people.
So, Mr Mayor, effectively what the Director is saying through you is that it's not going to have that much of an impact, the fact that they haven't responded. Yeah. Look, my view on this one is, when I first saw the objection, 83.4%, I thought to myself, gosh, you know, I'm going to have to vote against this, as there are too many people opposing this. Then when I looked at the numbers, 83% representing 5 people and 16%, that is one person supporting it, I thought, well, you know, the officers can't have it too wrong. So on that basis, and given that it's a boundary road, and given that that area is conducive to this type of development, I would certainly commend the officer's recommendation on this one as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. And I have noticed the acting manager is waving her arms frantically, trying to get some comments in. Sorry, I haven't been looking over there, so would you like to?
Thank you,
Ms.
Mr
Lumbacher?
Mayor. Not frantically, just subtly.
Excitedly.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right. So just a few points of clarification. So thank you, Councillor Sandry, with the conditions. Just to confirm, we usually do put the date and the revision in. Condition 8, we don't have that because we're asking for a revised landscaping plan in condition 5. The other comments about the other conditions are noted. Councillor Farrelly, you are right. Sustainability is very important. The difference between this development and the multi-developments, so one's volume 2 of the R codes, which is more design-based. This one's volume 1. SPP 7.0 is broad. They are looking to review, the Department of Planning are looking to review volume 1, so that will be more aligned with volume 2, but at the moment we're not there yet, so we're operating under a different planning framework.
Okay, thank you. Now, Councillor Thornton, you are indicating you have debated, so you can ask a question though if you'd like, but it has to be a question.
It is a question. Just based on the definition of an advanced tree, I see that it's got to be 90 litres, 2 metres high and 2 years old. But beyond that, are there any other conditions on that? So effectively, we don't look at the quality of the canopy, so it could just remain at 2 metres high and be a stick. No.
We hope it would grow.
Thank you.
Mr Roddick?
Through you, Mr Mayor, Councillor Thornton, that's correct. I mean, the condition as written is what is required, how that tree develops in the future. We hope that the canopy does increase on the site, but no, we can only condition it with those requirements.
Thank you. So there's no other indication. I will go to Councillor Reid to close debate.
Thank you very much. I think it was actually a very good debate. I mean, from different rules, I think we've got to look at going forward, what do we want, as Councillor Farrelly said. We really need to seriously look at where we're going in the future with these developments. I don't think, as Councillor Caddy said, that whether or not it fits in with the other amenity because they're all big, let's keep going big. Well, we could have that paraphrasing it. That could be the issue with Scarborough, it could be the issue with Mount Lawley, it could be the issue with Carrinup. Just because we've got one doesn't mean we've got to have 100 of them exactly the same. We're supposed to be here to represent the community, and yes, it might have only been a few people might have actually replied, but where we actually are in Herdsman Parade is a lot of itinerants, a lot of people that don't realise the impact on all these cars, and having 24 units is potentially 48 more cars. I think 48 more cars on a single little tiny skinny road is more than just nothing. I think it really is significant, especially the people there. There are already issues there. We're compounding it. I don't believe that it's difficult for this council to say no to the RAR report because we don't have the comments from Cambridge. We don't understand what's going to happen in the future. The fact of our sustainability with the lighting, with the shadowing, with the less trees, and yes, they could be sticks, Councillor Thornton. We have no idea. Just looking out at our car park, those trees that have been there for 15 years should be a bit bigger. But we don't have a say in those trees, probably not. All of those things add up to the fact that what are we doing going forward? You know, I think this is a great opportunity for council to make a stand on behalf of the community, on behalf of good building sense, which Councillor Sandry makes a comment on regularly. We've got to get a better planning, better design. We should be having more than half the houses get natural light. What happens when they want to have solar hot water systems? Gone. And they're so tightly packed there won't be any wind.
What's your point of order, Councillor?
The report doesn't say that those units do not have natural light. I think Councillor Ree is misrepresenting the facts.
Okay, Councillor Ree, let's continue and just keep it on the facts and close debate, please.
Well, I could go back to page 143, which makes a comment that there's no natural light, but that's just me.
No,
that's not what the comment makes.
It
Councillor,
does make the comment, thank you. What I'm saying is we actually can't change the RAR report. This is a difficult problem that we keep seeing with the JDAPs. We as council can't change that report. So we have to accept what's written. But we as council don't have to endorse that report. It's still going to go up. There won't be any changes made. But as a council, we can sit there and say, enough's enough. We need to sit there and look after our ratepayers. We need to look at the health of our ratepayers going forward. And this would be actually a great stand to say, these developers, I know they want to make a lot of money. I know they're trying to get better designs for their little square areas. But you have to think of the human health. They could have done this with just taking off, say, 4 or 5 units, and it could be better. It's not about jam-packing everything into one lot, and it shouldn't be, because at the end of the day, it comes back to us. Mental health is really important. It's increasing every day in the suburbs. We're trying to buy land for public open spaces to counteract this concrete living that we're subjecting ratepayers to. We have to stop somehow and say, Planning Commission, listen, these are people, and these are our people, our community, and the buck stops with us. So I'd like everyone to please consider supporting this on behalf of our ratepayers, and as we know, the RAR report stays as it is, but as a Conservative council, looking after our community going forward, I think it would be important and it would send a message out there, we care.
Thank you, Councillor Ree. So with that closed debate. So we've got a motion, moved Councillor Ree, seconded Councillor Thornton to not endorse the city's RAR, noting that there's a foreshadowed motion from Councillor Caddy for the officer's recommendation. I'll now put Ree and Thornton's motion to the vote. Thank you. So I think we're missing one. Are we? No, we've got them. Oh, we're missing 2. That's right. All right, so that motion is lost, 10-3, noting that Councillor Migdal and Councillor Boothman are still out of the chamber, obviously. So we now have Councillor Caddy's motion, which is the officer's recommendation. Council endorse the city's RAR. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Sargent this has been debated long enough, so if you're happy with it, I'll put it straight to the vote. Councillor Ree? Yep, and that motion is carried. So for, we have Councillors Caddy, Ferrante, Hatton, Lagan, Perkoff, Proud, Sandri, Sargent, Spagnola and myself, and against Councillors Farrelly, Ree and Thornton. We'll now go on to item 14, which is motions of which previous notice has been given. Item 14.1. Councillor Migdale. Just. So Councillor Boothman and Councillor Migdale are back in the chamber, which is handy because this was Councillor Migdale's notice of motion. So item 14.1, the notice of motion of Councillor Susan Migdale, Latrobe Street and Wordsworth Avenue, Yokine, intersection options, page 294 of the report, noting there is a suggested alt rec on page 299. Your motion, Councillor Migdale.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I would like to move the alt rec, please, on 294, not the alt rec, the suggested, the recommendation on 294. Thank you.
Thank you, which is the one that the city does not proceed with the concepts, and the officers are... Let's make sure we get... Okay. Well, I was just testing you, Councillor Migdale. Is there a seconder for Councillor Migdale's motion? Councillor Ferrante, sorry, I didn't know that was an indication. Councillor Ferrante, is there anyone opposed? Councillor Caddy, we'll go to you for debate.
Oh boy. Thanks, Mr Mayor. So,
for those viewing at
Oh,
home,
wait.
it's important you also know that it's Councillor Migdale's birthday this evening, so it's very impressive that she's here tonight.
thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, there have been several crashes at this intersection over the past few years, which have involved vehicles leaving the roadway and crashing into private property. Thankfully, there were no pedestrians injured on any of these occasions. Given the close proximity to Yokine Reserve, and after having spoken with several of the local residents who they feel it's only a matter of time before there is a more serious incident at this T-junction. So I raised this notice of motion on their behalf as the voice for the constituents, residents of this area. It's only right that our residents should have the opportunity to improve safety on their local streets. Let's put this out to community consultation and give several options, one of which would be to do nothing, and a few other options of ways that we could mitigate the risk of any issues arising. Let's put it out to the community and allow them to give their feedback on what they feel should occur here. I would ask you all to please support this item.
Thank you. Councillor Ferrante.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Myself, Councillor Lagan, attended a site meeting with about 30 residents, and a secondary meeting that Councillor Migdale and myself attended with the officers as well. And this location is problematic, has been for a little while. Wordsworth and Swanston is a major feeder into Flinders. We have continuous people going through the stop signs, that one stop sign that's on Swanston and the other one's a give way. Which is the location of where the T-junction is a discussion tonight. We continuously have complaints from our ratepayers in the vicinity. On that day, there were a lot of also tearful people from the psychological impacts of the car now twice going through the same location and damaging a wall that is an entertaining area. So there's also been another sequence of the same area going down a driveway and slamming into a house that was down a laneway. So the speed is quite high as they come to this T-junction. This report or motion is to look at a couple of different options to run by the ratepayers and to seek their view, and then they'll be represented back to council. So I look forward to councillors supporting this evening. Thank you.
Councillor Caddy.
Thank you. And look, I'm not going to debate whether or not this intersection needs treatment. This is about prioritisation. And there are a number of intersections around the city, a large number of intersections around the city that require treatment, and the officers have to prioritise our expenditure and have to spread that over time. And I guess when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about the fact that recently I had to go out to one of my local clubs and walk the grounds looking at their lighting. And I had to say to those clubs, yeah, I agree with you, this lighting is substandard, and I agree with you that this absolutely needs to be fixed. But I also have to tell you that there are another 8 clubs that are ahead of you in the queue, and you're just going to have to wait. And unfortunately, that's what the officers are saying here. They're not saying that it doesn't need it. They're just saying that when we've got limited money to spend, there are other intersections that have higher number of crashes, that have higher issues that we're going to have to put ahead of this one. And if we're not going to be prepared to prioritise the money, then why would we ask the officers to do the design, go through community consultation, because it's actually a worse outcome to have gone through all of this, raise community expectations that something's not going to, is going to get done, and it doesn't end up getting prioritised on the budget because it's 10th in line or 11th in line or 12th in line, and we can only fund 8 in the next year. So, you know, I'm not discounting what's being said about the need, but I'm taking on board the officers' comments that there are a lot of intersections that do have need, and that this doesn't fall within their top priority to do within the next 12 months. So I absolutely understand why the ward councillors are putting this up, and the only reason I'm voting against it is a prioritisation matter that, you know, we only have limited funds to spend, and we have to trust that the officers are doing a rigorous job of prioritisation.
Thank you. Councillor Lagan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a question to the officers through you. Can the officers tell me whether there has been previously any studies or concepts put forward for Wordsworth Avenue, say in the last 5-6 years?
Mr Littleton.
Look, I can say that that Latrobe in particular has been calm. So there was a proposal around traffic calming for Latrobe, not so much Wordsworth. Wordsworth is an important local distributor, but this is at an intersection, and we felt that that Latrobe, Wordsworth had been dealt with through that traffic calming treatment.
But just to clarify, there's been no concept works done at all in the last, say, 5 or 6 years on Wordsworth?
Mr Littleton.
If around this intersection, the work was considered as part of the Latrobe traffic management, which was undertaken in the last 2 years.
So yes, this intersection was considered.
Thank you. And can I just make some comment?
Yeah.
Yep. So I did attend with Councillor Ferranti on the Saturday morning and met with the community in the area. I don't disagree with Councillor Caddy's concepts of prioritisation. This, to me, though, is a clear example of an issue that needs to be triaged to the top. Someone is going to be either killed or seriously injured there. The evidence of that is the fact that 2 vehicles have gone straight over the top of this intersection. They haven't stopped at all and gone straight into housing. And we even commented when we were standing there, it was amazing that the entrance road for the housing looks like a continuation of Wordsworth. And that's exactly what's happened. Vehicles have just barreled on through and ended up hitting a bedroom. Now, probably the biggest impact for me when I talk about triaging was there was 1 or 2 people in particular who met us on the Saturday morning of that site who have been severely impacted in their mental health to the point where they're actually going to consider leaving the area, moving out of the property, because in their estimation, their lived experience is this is so dangerous, it's not safe to stay here. They don't need an officer report. They don't need a recommendation about other priorities in the city. They need the problem fixed. And I think this looks at developing some conceptual considerations. It's not asking us to go and fix it tomorrow. I think that's the least we can do as a council, especially when the community's asked us to come out and stand there and have a look at this. And they've made it very clear to us that it has had a severe impact on their mental health and on their fear, and they don't feel safe in their area. I don't discount the fact there are other intersections in the city that probably need treatment, and that's often the case with many of the issues in the city that we look at. But this one, in my view, this is a fair handling of the situation. It's not committing us at the moment to funds. It's committing us to having a look and responding to what the community asked us to do. And in fact, on the Saturday morning, one of the things that was commented about by the lead petitioner, I guess, the person who asked us to come, was he actually said to us, when we asked you to come here and talk to us, we didn't want a response that was a government response. We wanted a response that was a human response, and I agree with him.
Thanks, Councillor Lagan. Councillor Ree.
Thank you. I'd like to foreshadow the officer's recommendation, please. Before I start the comment, I'd just like to have a comment with regard to the 3 crashes that are actually written here today. Were those crashes related to any traffic to do with the road or anything, please, the 3 crashes?
Mr Littleton.
Thank you, Councillor Ree. Look, I haven't got the exact details of the specifics of the crashes. There were 3 crashes in the space of the last 5 years recorded through the crash data that we collect through main roads. My understanding is, though, that they were property-related incidents. I understand that the event that prompted the most recent concerns was a driver failing to negotiate the intersection late at night or early in the morning, and potentially with affected by alcohol.
Councillor Ree.
So if you had speed bumps or something like that, would that have made any difference if you were drunk or anything? Probably not. I won't ask that because you don't drink. But I think one of the issues too that I'd also like answered, when Wadsworth was actually looked at, when they put in the roundabouts, wasn't it at the same time that they looked at that intersection?
That's already been answered, Councillor. It's in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and not with any roundabout construction. It was as part of the Latrobe speed restrictions or traffic calming that was implemented.
Thank you. I believe that when it was looked at the time, a lot of the residents did not like the idea of speed humps, and for those remember the amount of publicity we had over the Beryl Street speed bumps. Wouldn't like to go there again. A lot of people don't want speed bumps. Is there any reason why that the modifications can't be done to that corner, such as raised curbing, because the crashes weren't actually related to just the configuration. There were things outside the road.
Councillor Ree, I think it's important to note that this motion on the table hasn't asked for speed bumps. It's asked for the council to develop some concepts. There's no reason anything can't be considered during that process.
Oh, well, that's why I was just making a comment. So is there any reason why it can't be just now raised curbing or something like that, rather than undertaking...
I think it's important to note we're not trying to solve what the traffic treatment is tonight, Councillor. It's clear. If the city develops a number of concept options, so everything will be considered. But I think we need to just leave that outside this meeting.
Well, I was coming back to the crashes. I don't think the crashes were really related to the road. They were more human associated, from what I gather from the residents. So that makes it different. I agree with Councillor Caddy. I mean, we've got a lot of priorities. I mean, we've got Castle Road that's had quite a few accidents, Ewan Street, that's lots of fun, that could do with a whole lot of calming devices. I think we need to put this into perspective of what the people need. We did spend a lot of time and a lot of money on that street when we put in the roundabouts, talking to people what they wanted. Everybody knows there are issues everywhere in streets. There are. And then people run from one thing to another. It's not only the bowling club, it's people going to the swimming pool, it's people accessing Flinders Street. There's whole issues why people go in that corner, and not different from some others. So at this precise moment in time, I don't think it's necessary, and I would rather support the officers, because the officers are the ones that are getting all the information on a regular basis, and they're the ones that are prioritising.
Thank you. Councillor Sargent first, and I've got you, Councillor Farrelly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question. We talk about priorities. We talk about that the city's got a number of priorities that are ahead of this one. where would this particular intersection sit in that priority? Are we talking in the next couple of years, 5 years, 10 years? When would we actually sit down and go, this particular intersection is considered at the top of the priority list?
Mr. Littleton.
Thank you, Worship. Look, we understand, given the history at the moment, it ranks 424 in our list of intersections to date.
Give or take.
Yeah, 424, it's pretty precise. And how many do we chop off a year?
Mr. Littleton.
Look, we treat need, I guess. So I couldn't probably tell you off the top of my head exactly how many we deal with per annum. We certainly are dealing with a number of intersections this year through the Black Spot program, both state and federal. But an exact number I don't have off the top of my head.
Thank you. Councillor Sargent.
Just quickly, Mr. Mayor. So from the sounds to me that this intersection won't be looked at from the city for many, many years to come. And I do want to support the ward councillors, and I will support this recommendation today, mainly because why are we here as councillors? And that's what it always comes back to me. Councillors play a role in the City of Stirling, and it is our job when we deal with budgets and all the rest of it to actually look at the priorities and decide what we think the priorities of the City of Stirling should be. And from my perspective on this one, the councillors in that part of the world are actually saying the priorities here should be elevated well ahead of 423. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well said, Councillor Sargent. Councillor Farrelly.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Look, I concur in a way with Councillor Sargent and my co-councillors over the other side of the table there in regard to the prioritisation of these black spots or whatever you'd like to call them. But I also then would state how and when do we start changing this prioritisation and what is it based upon? Councillor Caddy comes from the same ward as I do. Currently we've got a high tourism spot which has people walking...
Councillor, we just have to keep on this.
Yes, all right. But where there's a lot of prioritisation demands, I believe, placed on the city, and
councillors, just if we can have a bit of quiet, Nelly.
and I would ask that if we are going to look at changing from, the different priorities, let's do it across the board. So I'd prefer that we held this one back. Is that what one can do? Hold it over?
No.
And we ask for that priority list and have a look at it and work through it.
Councillor, I think it's really important. The last thing Council wants to do, I can speak for Mr. Littleton, is go through 424
Thank you.
road
All right,
priorities.
I will. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? If not, I will go back to, Councillor Hatton.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'd just like to say on this particular one that it's not always about crash data, and sometimes officers do get it wrong. They don't get they get the data right, but they don't get the emotion of the community right. Now, I remember going back a few years ago with the corner of Boyer and Erindale Road. It was a massive, there's a petition of 500 people. I lived in the area for 20 years, saw a couple of deaths there.
Councillor, it's been a long night. Let's stay to this subject.
The point I'm making is that this particular road, or this particular intersection, is a highly used road, Wordsworth down there. It is the way to get to the shopping centre down the road. It is the thoroughfare that's used by many. Now, what happened down at Boyer was that a lot of old people and young people just didn't use the intersection. They had angst, they had fear, like Councillor Lagan was saying. It impacted on mental health. And I'm suggesting, in this particular case, that there could be money needed to be spent there to save all that happening. So sometimes we have to look more local rather than just on crash data. That's all the point I want to make. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. And I will go to Councillor McDowell to close debate now.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and I'll make this brief. Really, when I was on site not so long ago, I saw out of 6 cars, 5 neglected to stop at a stop sign. 5 out of 6. It is quite insane, and there's definitely times of the day peak periods where there's an extreme amount of traffic. Bear in mind, you're only 100 odd, 150 metres from a children's playground, right? So just put it into perspective. If you had young ones who were walking the streets, in 2 years there have been 2 vehicles mount the curb, right? They have come up off the road, left the road, and come up onto the curb. It is a dire predicament. I thank all councillors for their robust debate and have taken on board some really valid points. Let's put this to the local community. Let's put this to them for them to consult on to see what they feel should be the best outcomes in this scenario. I hope you support this item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And with that, that closed debate. Move Councillor Migdal, seconded Councillor Friday, noting that Councillor Ree has a foreshadowed motion. Councillor Ree, we're waiting for a vote. Thank you. And that motion is carried. For we have Councillor Boothman, Ferranti, Hatton, Lagan, Migdal, Perkoff, Proud, Ree, Sandri, Sargent, Spagnolo, Thornton, myself, and against Councillor Caddy and Farrelly. We'll now go on to item 15, which is notice of motion for consideration at the next meeting. Councillors, would you like to submit any notice of motions for consideration at the next meeting? Councillor Lagan.
Yes, I'd like to submit that the City investigates a number of options for the intersection of Beaufort Street and 10th Avenue, Inglewood, to address ongoing safety issues, including left-hand turn only. And the reason is the rapid development along Beaufort Street is resulting in issues turning right safely onto Beaufort Street, and the community has voiced concern and an interest in safe traffic flow options.
Okay. I was going to say, Mr Littleton said that's 456. Is there any other notice of motion, councillors? No indication. We'll go on to item 16, questions by members of which due notice has been given. We have nil. 17, new business of an urgent nature. We have nil. We now go to item 18, matters behind closed doors. Councillors, can I get a mover and a seconder to go behind closed doors, please? Move Councillor Migdal, seconded Councillor Perkoff. Go to the vote, please. Thank you. Councillor Ferranti, have you got a problem with us going behind closed doors? Is your indication that... Let's just stop. I think we have to do the... I know it's only to go behind closed doors. Just a show of hands, councillors. Can I just have the vote? That is unanimous. Thank you. Noting that we are now going behind closed doors, so the live streaming will cease.